Yassas Anglia, greetings from Greece. I came to Athens in March, on the 1st of March, to take a language course which was cancelled by a global pandemic, and I decided to stay put. Because since January 2000, I've been working on a Greek-focused project which has underlain all my other projects and is in fact the greatest task of my life, and I am close to completing it now. I spent those months of lockdown in Athens with wonderful afternoon walks, 3-hour walks around the ghost town, the most beautiful ghost town in the world perhaps, wandering around the Acropolis, wandering around the Philippapou Hills, and just thinking out the book I've been working on for so long. And now here I am in the Peloponnese on the terrace of a beautiful house that belongs to John and Hilary Sperling. John wrote 2 books of Greek mythology here, and they bought this house when it was a ruin, partly from the proceeds of the Whitbread Prize, which Hilary won for her magnificent biography of Matisse, and which is for me the perfect art book, and if you haven't yet read it, I hugely recommend it. And I'm hoping that just a little bit of that gold dust will rub off on me as I write the book of my life. Now, we're on a mountain side of the Peloponnese looking out over the blue Aegean, and I half expect Odysseus to sail around the headland at any moment. But better yet, I'm looking across to the island of Spetses, where in October 1946, Lucian Freud, as a 23rd birthday present, taught John Craxton to swim. This tiny footnote, or some would think an irrelevant detail in the history of 20th century British art, is, for me, the key to a much bigger story, because it gave John the opportunity to immerse himself in the physicality of life in Greece, which flooded over his paintings and his life for the next 60 years. He was the ultimate hedonist. Nobody ever enjoyed life more than he did, and I must say I'm finding his story the perfect antidote to a world of crisis. He ignored politics always. He ignored most things apart from what he wanted to do. He had amazing resolution. He was born in October 1922 into a large musical Bohemian family in London. He was unteachable. He never passed a single examination in his life, not even in art, and he was unstoppable. He was kicked out, or as he would say, he walked out of 6, 7 or 8 schools. And in a life of great good fortune, one of his greatest strokes of luck was being sent to live with an uncle and aunt in Dorset who were artists. And really this was an act of desperation by his parents to keep him out of mischief. While in Dorset, he responded to the local landscape and the history of the place, but his great fortune was having the Pitt Rivers Museum just an easy walk away. And he was given the free run of the place, and it was there that he educated himself. And the Pitt Rivers Museum was an amazing treasure house of eclectic and eccentric proportions. And what John responded to in this great Aladdin's Cave of Marvels was ancient Greek art in all its forms, the art of the ancient Greek world, not just in what we now think of as Greece, but across the Mediterranean. And 1 or 2 of those marvellous things were subsequently bought by Robert and Lisa Sainsbury, things which actually had a big impact on John. One was a Cycladic figure, a classic elongated female figure from the Cyclades Islands, and the other was a Fayum coffin portrait from Roman era Egypt when the prevailing culture was still redolently Greek. Both those things were enormously influential on John Craxton. He, as I say, was unteachable. He in 1939, when he was 16, he went to Paris to study life classes, or just to drop in on life classes, not to be taught. And it was there that even he couldn't ignore the approach of war, and he was finally summoned home. And for the next 6 years, he was in an island of entrapment, besieged, and this fed into his very melancholic art. But he was not a melancholic figure himself at all, as I said, and another stroke of good luck was that he met up with Lucian Freud when he was only 19, and they had adjoining studios, and these anarchic spirits roared through wartime Soho and put down their incredible sense of inventiveness and daring into art, which came to be seen as great hopes for the future of British art. But John was having none of this. He never conformed to what other people expected of him, and he always longed to be away. He and Lucian could finally get away in the summer of 1945, with the war over, as far as the Scilly Isles. And the Scilly Isles appealed because off the coast of Cornwall, they somehow seem to have drifted to the Aegean. They are, as many of you will know, they are subtropical and white beaches, azure seas. And John was happy there for a brief moment, but even that wasn't enough to contain him. And he and Lucian stowed away on a Breton fishing boat, trying to get to Paris and Picasso, and ultimately, I think, to the Mediterranean, but they were apprehended by harbour police at Penzance and sent back. So John had to bide his time until, in a succession of events which became a characteristic Craxtonian adventure, he got himself to Greece in the spring of 1946, where he had a complete awakening. It was everything he expected and imagined and hoped, and more. Lucian followed him and stayed for 5 months, painting some of the most beautiful pictures of his life, and John never really left. He often returned to London to work on his ideas, but his whole soul really was occupied by Greece. He was kicked out for 10 years under the colonels from 1967, and wandered around the Mediterranean and elsewhere, Africa, but finally got back to Crete, and the house on the harbour at Hania, the Venetian house that he'd found in 1960, and which became his home and his studio, and where many of his best pictures were painted. So here I am, as I say, in the Peloponnese. I'm putting this book together, the biography of his life, which he banned for most of his life. I was lucky to meet him. I was a friend of a painter called Prunella Clough, who had a studio in Lowestoft in the 1940s. She was immensely private, but she did admit to that much. What she didn't say was that she also had a secret house in Southwold for much longer. She and I became friends. I knew her in London. I would have supper with her every month or two, always with the same one or two other people, and I might have thought that she knew nobody. She was a hermit, but in fact she was a sort of Russian doll with different circles of friendship. And when she died on Boxing Day 1999, I then went to her funeral, and I was astonished because it was jam-packed. St James's Piccadilly absolutely crammed to the gunnels. And then at the wake afterwards at the Anna Lee Judah Gallery, I was squashed against a figure of legend who was John Craxton. I recognised him immediately. I'd always loved his art and been intrigued by the romance of his life. He looked like a Cretan chieftain, huge moustaches, shepherd's stick, woven rucksack, and wild manner. And we went off to the French pub in Soho, where he'd drunk in 1941 when he was 18, and I asked even then if I could write his biography, and he said absolutely not. If you want to be my friend, never mention it again. So of course I started writing in secret, and luckily for me, some years later he conceded that I could write a monograph with him, which came out just after his death, and then just before he died, he agreed to my writing the biography that I've been working on ever since, and it's going to be published next March by Yale in English, and the following September by Patakis in Greek. And this has all come good just in time for his centenary, which will see a touring show starting at the Benaki Museum in Athens in April 22, moving to Crete for his actual anniversary in the autumn of 22, and then on, I hope, to Istanbul, before coming to as yet unfixed venues in the United Kingdom. Hope to see you there, and thanks for listening. You may have heard the backdrop to this talk, which is perhaps more interesting than what I'm saying, which is a soundtrack of cockerels. You hear that just on cue? I'm standing above a chicken coop, and there's a bird in the tree above me. But the amazing sound, most amazing sound of this area, on all sides of the house, sounds like a generator trying and failing to start up. And this is the sound of a donkey braying, in fact 3 donkeys braying. It must have been incredible when only a few years ago this area was still reliant on donkey transport. They are wonderful beasts, but John didn't ever actually paint them as far as my knowledge goes. Apart from the Greek people, the ordinary Greek people that were perhaps his main focus, he had many famous friends, but he preferred to paint sailors, shepherds, and ordinary peasant people. He painted goats, and you may possibly hear a little bell in the background, which is of a goat foraging in the olive groves above the house. In fact, hundreds of goats foraging, and also sheep, and just to let you know that I am authentically in Greece, but looking forward to being back in Norfolk and seeing you all again. Best wishes. Yassas.